Ever since Squid Game captivated global audiences in 2021, many observers have pointed out its eerie similarity to a grim chapter in South Korea's history. At the heart of this comparison lies the notorious Brothers Home facility. Numerous people have suggested that the concept for Hwang Dong-hyuk's dystopian survival drama may have been inspired by the events that occurred there. Although Hwang never addressed these speculations directly, he did share that the idea for Squid Game stemmed from his own struggles and a fascination with survival-themed comics. Despite the lack of confirmation, a strong belief persists that Brothers Home was the real-life foundation for the show's narrative. Testimonies from survivors of these actual concentration camps from the late 1980s echo chilling similarities to the scenes portrayed in the series. While fiction often exaggerates reality, in this instance it seems that the line between the two is startlingly thin. Brothers Home has shocking similarities to Squid Game. Brothers Home was a real concentration camp that operated in South Korea during the 1980s. At that time, South Korea was undergoing rapid development. As part of preparations for the Seoul Olympics, the government initiated a nationwide campaign to rebrand its image, claiming it was creating welfare centers to provide education and job training for the country's most vulnerable populations. At least, that was the official narrative. These centers had government backing and law enforcement involvement, yet were run privately. Brothers Home, owned by Park In-kuen and his brother-in-law Lim Young-soon, was among 36 such facilities across the country. In the series A Squid Game, the character Hwang Jun-ho, a police officer, searches for his missing brother who vanished without a trace. His investigation leads nowhere. From Gi-hun's point of view, we see how he is drugged and transported to a remote island to participate in deadly games. While there are differences between the show and real-life events, the element of people disappearing is grounded in reality. Han Jong-soon, a survivor of the camp, recounted to the BBC how it happened. He described how a bus pulled up in front of a police substation where he and his sister were left while their father went to work. They were forced onto the bus and taken to an unknown location. When they resisted and cried, they started beating them until they stopped. They ended up at a so-called welfare center, and survivors would later speak out about the severe abuse and horrific conditions they experienced. Han and his sister remained there for 3.5 years. The welfare centers were primarily privately run institutions. Reports suggested that police officers were given incentives for cleansing the streets by sending homeless individuals, orphaned children, people with disabilities, those without proper identification, beggars, and others facing difficult circumstances to these centers as part of the so-called social purification projects. Officially, the purpose of these centers was to provide education and training for a year before returning individuals to their families. In practice, however, people were disappearing from the streets without any explanation. Choi Sung-woo shared his experience of spending 5 years in one of these facilities, describing it as imprisonment. To maintain control, the center operated with a military-like structure. He lived in a platoon under the command of another detainee who was given the authority to educate and enforce rules, often using physical punishment. The platoon leader and a few others stripped me and dumped a bucket of cold water on me, Choi said. He also revealed that sexual abuse took place during the night. Eventually, Choi came to the horrifying realization that people are being killed here. The real-life concentration camps were a lot worse than Squid Game. In Squid Game, all participants are adults. However, during the 1980s, many of those detained in concentration camps were children. Lee Dong-jin, for instance, was sent to Brothers Home at the age of 10 and remained there for 7 years. He shared that he was identified by a number. At Brothers Home, he was referred to as number 110, according to the New York Times. The facility was run by Park In-kuen, a former boxer and military officer who maintained control by turning inmates against one another. Their tactic was to encourage inmates to abuse each other, explained Park Min-seong, another survivor of the Brothers Home, in an interview with 101 East. Choi recounted being treated like toys for platoon leaders. Those who resisted or pleaded to go home were often beaten to death and wrapped in blankets. Even the platoon leaders themselves weren't safe from punishment. The platoon leader I spoke with expressed conflicted feelings about the past. He admitted he viewed himself as a villain, but claimed he did it to survive, stated Professor Park Suk-young, who investigated the events that occurred at Hyungjae Bokjiwon, a facility similar to Brothers Home. He added that these leaders also faced punishment if someone escaped. Survivors also described being forced to play deadly games as part of their punishment. By 1986, the population at these camps had surged to over 16,000, as reported by AP News. Lee Chae-sik was only 13 when he was placed in Brothers Home, where he was assigned to work in the medical ward. He recalled how stronger inmates would beat and sexually assault weaker ones in exchange for food and supplies. According to Han, when the lights went out, things became even more terrifying. That's when the sexual abuse would begin, he told CNN. But the abuse wasn't limited to the dark. From the moment you wake up to the moment you fall asleep, you're subjected to abuse, he remembered. There was also a financial motivation behind Brothers Home. The facility turned into a major source of income that profited individuals outside its walls. Although it was promoted as a place offering job training, the reality for most inmates was unpaid forced labor. The facility was Park's kingdom, and he ruled it through violence, stated Kim Jin-ho, a spokesman for Daewoo International. Inmates were made to produce everything from toys to sneakers without receiving any wages. Labor costs were nearly non-existent, resulting in substantial profits. At the height of its operation, Park was awarded 2 national medals for his contributions to social welfare and his efforts to uplift the lowest classes. Both he and Lim denied any misconduct at Brothers Home. Lim even told the Associated Press that shutting down the facility harmed national interests, arguing that the high death toll was largely due to the poor health conditions inmates already had before arriving. He showed no regret, saying those individuals would have died on the streets anyway. Those who endured Brothers Home were permanently affected. In Squid Game, Gi-hun emerged as the lone survivor of the first season's deadly competition. Though he returned home with a substantial fortune, the horrors he experienced on the island continued to torment him. Season 2 revisits his life 3 years later, showing that the trauma still felt fresh. Rather than trying to move forward, Gi-hun became consumed with finding the recruiter and exposing those behind the games. Likewise, after facilities like Brothers Home were eventually closed, survivors tried to return to normal life. Many were now adolescents or young adults, but their experiences had left a lasting mark. Unlike Gi-hun, they came back with nothing. No money, only scars. Following the closure of the welfare centers in 1988, Han and his sister found themselves homeless. The trauma they endured led them through a cycle of mental institutions for years. Han expressed deep anger over what he described as a meaningless life without being treated as a human. The pain lingered. Even decades later, his bitterness toward the government remained strong, especially because of the continued denial and cover-up of the abuses. He sought acknowledgement for the cruelty and violations that had occurred. Despite the atrocities committed at Brothers Home, its owner, Park, faced minimal consequences, only serving a short prison sentence for lesser offenses. After 2 years, he returned to the social welfare field in Korea. His brother-in-law Lim left the country with his family in 1986 and resettled in Australia, aided by a local church that helped him gain permanent residency. Park later joined Lim in Sydney, where they founded their own church. Eventually, Park launched Job's Town in Australia, effectively reviving the legacy of Brothers Home abroad. Choi lost his brother to suicide in 2009 and was never able to live as a whole person. "Society still saw us as vagrants," Choi said. He endured discrimination and social exclusion throughout his life. Although Brothers Home was part of his past, it haunted him like a ghost. "I could only live the life of a vagrant like a beast. No one reached out to us, we were branded by the state, and the people followed that label," he said. Despite circulating rumors, Squid Game, Creator Hwang Dong-hyuk never cited Brothers Home as the inspiration behind the show. Instead, the concept came from his own struggles with financial hardship and his interest in survival-themed comics. Still, Squid Game is rich in social commentary. While Brothers Home wasn't a direct influence, it sheds light on South Korea's past and provides context for the environment in which Squid Game was created.